Thank you very much, Mark, and it's great to be here, and it is good to see you as well. And I definitely feel a sense of joy and honor of being with all of you this afternoon as part of this assembly, no, Diocesan Assembly 2020 in the Diocese of Grand Rapids. So let's briefly reflect on the idea of what it means to share the good news with others. It's been a day of reflection about the question of encounter and what encountering Christ, what encountering God means and does in our lives. In 2005, Pope Benedict XVI wrote an encyclical called Deus Caritas Est. And he opened the encyclical stating something that the Christian community has known for centuries, but I mean, every now and then we tend to forget, And this actually has been a line that has guided and inspired this particular assembly. Pope Benedict said, "Being Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life to a new horizon and a decisive direction." What a wonderful way of beginning, a reflection on the practice of discipleship. Christian discipleship is grounded in the experience of an encounter, but not any encounter, because Christianity is not something that we concoct in libraries like the one that's behind me, or that we somehow come into organizations and imagine what it means to be a Christian, and let's find out discussions about rules or about practices. It begins always with an encounter, and in this particular case, an encounter with Jesus Christ, who is the Son of God, the risen Lord, through whom we receive salvation. When we say personal encounter, we need to be attentive to the fact that from a Christian Catholic tradition, we do not mean individualistic encounter. When we say personal encounter, we are making reference to the intimacy of that experience that we have with God. And that happens both at an individual level, but also at a communal level. And we need to keep these two dynamics in balance. Personal encounter, it's both individual and communal. And in light of that, then we encounter God not only through the individual practices and dynamics that we may have as persons, but we also encounter God in the community as we pray, as we get together, as we celebrate, as we serve one another. The encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ does something to our lives. Something happens when we encounter the Lord, It is a transforming encounter that thrusts us into sharing what we have experienced and into acting in light of what we have experienced. Now, notice these two dynamics, okay? On the one hand, we tell what happened to us. We give witness of what has happened. The Lord transformed my life. The Lord touched my life. The Lord called me into conversion or called me into a particular experience. But because of that experience, and here comes the second dynamic, because of that experience, then I go out and tell what I have experienced. Pope Francis speaks about this as the thrust of missionary discipleship. So every disciple who has experienced the Lord cannot stay where he or she is, but it has to share it, you know. That's the dynamic actually that we also see in the experience of the Trinity. So God, who is God, love, no, infinite love, constantly shares that love with the rest of the created order, but particularly with us. I have always been fascinated by a text from the first letter of John, right at the beginning. The author of the letter of John says words that have always stayed with me when I think about Christian discipleship or missionary discipleship. The letter says, "What we have seen and heard, we proclaim now to you, so that you too may have fellowship with us." That's 1 John chapter 1, verse 3. What we have seen and heard, we proclaim now to you, so that you too may have fellowship with us. Well, let's add a third element to this double dynamic that I had mentioned before. So remember the first two elements. One, we witness what God has done in our lives. Two, we, because of that encounter, go out and continue to give witness. But the third dynamic that we learn from this particular biblical text is that when we give, that the reason for which we give witness and go out to continue to give witness is because we want others to believe. We want others to experience something similar to what we have experienced. And then, in light of that, we want them to live in communion with God and with the rest of the baptized community. And that's fascinating. So this threefold dynamic, or these three elements that are part of this dynamic of sharing faith, are are the background for four practical ways that I want to share with you about precisely sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Okay, so here we go. So keep in mind those three dynamics. We give witness, and because we have had that experience, we are constantly moved to give further witness, and we give witness to others in order to, for them to believe and to be in communion with God and with the rest of the church. So here are four ways, practical, very practical. I love to tell my students, and I teach mostly master students and doctoral students, and as much as we like the sophisticated arguments, and as much as we like to read books and complicate life, I always give them a warning. Christianity is not rocket science. You do not need a doctoral degree to be a good Christian. You do not need a master's degree to be a good Christian. Now, it can help us because we can understand, we can actually serve better our communities. But Christianity, as a matter of fact, the gift of Christianity lies in its simplicity, and that simplicity, which doesn't mean superficiality, but actually in the simplicity of Christianity, it's its own depth. And that is that encounter, is expressed in practical ways, four ways. One, speak about your faith with others. One practical way of being a good Christian and being a disciple. Commonsensical. Yet, there are many Catholics out there who are afraid of talking our faith. Sometimes we are afraid, or we don't know how to do it. Sometimes we just feel a sense of shame. Sometimes we are lazy. We just don't want to do that, and we don't want to engage that. And we say, well, let's let Father so and so, or Deacon so and so, or Sister so and so, or this lady who works for the church. Let's have them do the talk, and I'll stay quiet. No, let's begin by doing this practical thing. Tell your story, and tell it in simple ways, Say share with your children, your spouse, your neighbor, the other adults who live in your house, your friends, what God has done in your life. Doesn't have to be something complicated, Simply say, God blessed me in this particular way, or God has done this, or this is how I engage in relationship with God. But we need to share anytime we have a chance what we think about God. That's how we keep the ball rolling in terms of evangelization. If we, St. Paul in the letter to the Romans said it very clearly. How are they going to believe if nobody proclaims to them, if nobody tells them this story? We have to share it one way or another, and we have to share it, beginning with the simplicity of our own stories. This is how God has worked in my life. That's basic witness. How long does it have to take? If you can start with 10 seconds, that will be enough, Then eventually you will be like one of these college professors, who speak for 3 hours in a row and nobody, pretty much, silences them. But let's start simple, short story, and, how God is working in your life. And as part of doing this, so we proclaim our convictions, we proclaim what God's grace is all about, what being church means to us, what salvation, is about in our lives, and so on. When we proclaim, when we talk about our faith, we then begin to articulate in a more sophisticated way what we believe, and then discover that there are many things that we don't know. Therefore, we need to prepare ourselves as much as possible so we can give better witness, no? And this is why we need urgently in every diocese, in every parish in the United States of America and throughout the world, a solid adult catechesis. We continue to think that catechesis is primarily for the little kids or for the young people who are in the religious education program or in the Catholic school or who are in a youth group, and we as adults don't need that. If we want to speak with conviction, we have to prepare ourselves. We got to go to the Bible study classes. We have to take theology classes. We have to go to the prayer group. We have to learn how to pray and so on. And part of also giving this testimony, this witness, sharing our story, implies defending our faith. Because there is a lot of confusion out there about what Catholics do. There are still, in early Christianity, some people believed that Roman Catholics ate babies. I mean, just imagine that, In early Christianity, some people believed that Christians actually practiced cannibalism, or that they did something occult, something that was hidden and sometimes maybe vicious. Well, guess what? Today, a lot of people think that Christians do strange stuff, and that Catholics are a cult, and that people don't know, how to operate. And we need to defend our faith. We need to be able to go out and share the beauty of the gospel, the beauty of what we believe, And that is what the Christian tradition has called apologetics. But be careful. I don't want to promote the type of apologetics that, somehow uses the practice of, you say a biblical text and I will respond with two biblical texts, and then I will show you how you and your family are going to hell. That's not the apologetics that I'm promoting here, because in a way that ends up dividing and hurting many ways. Of course, we have to uphold what is true. That's not a problem. But the apologetics that I'm advocating for actually is inspired in some of the recent papacies as well, and it's an apologetics of love, mercy, and persuasion. An apologetics of love begins with the conviction that we, enter into a conversation about our faith. I tell you my story. I listen to your story because we love one another. It's an apologetics of mercy, because I recognize with humility that I do not know it all, and that I can learn from the other, that I can learn from you. And it's an apologetics of persuasion, insofar as we are constantly going into the different difficult questions about our lives. It pains me to see Roman Catholicism in the United States of America divided because of ideology and biases that we may have towards one another, when we fail to actually sit down and talk and pray together. So that's the first practical step. Talk about your faith. Do it. And the more you do it, the more you're going to like it, and the better you're going to get. Two, celebrate your faith regularly. No? And this is, again, commonsensical, but sometimes we forget. Piece of advice, dear friends: pray. And when in doubt, pray. When tired, pray. When happy, pray. That's what being a Christian is all about. Praying constantly. When you wake up, when you are ready to go to bed, before a meal, in a moment of difficulty, in a moment of joy, in a moment of success, always pray. That's what being a Christian is about. Some people say, I don't know how to pray. Well, start with what the basic prayers: Our Father, Hail Mary, and the many other prayers that you know. People in my parish said, I already said 150 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers, and this is getting boring, or this is getting monotonous. And I said, okay, let's go with your own words then, What about if you say, God, forgive me. God, I praise you. Lord, thank you very much. That's the beauty of prayer. It's not about the length. It's not about the complexity. It is about the intentionality of knowing that we are in relationship with God. Pray. Pray in season and out of season. And part of the prayer implies or involves going to the Eucharist, going to Mass at least once a week. Go to the Sunday Mass with your family. Participate, be nourished of the banquet of the Word and the banquet of the Eucharist. Be someone who practices this on a regular basis. It is concerning that only 20 to 25% of Roman Catholics in the United States of America go to Mass on a regular basis. And the younger the population, the smaller that percentage is. Well, we got to work on that, It is very difficult, I have to say, to call oneself Roman Catholic or a good Christian and not going to Mass and not worshiping. So celebrate the Eucharist, pray, and receive the sacraments. Third practice, simple, build community. Wow, not rocket science. This is what we do. As baptized women and men who have received the grace of baptism and the sacramental grace that God shares with us on a regular basis, we are wired to build community, because that's what the Spirit in us prompts us to do. And we begin by building community in our families, domestic churches, faithful communities. And then we build community in our churches, as we pray together, as we serve together, as we walk together, journey together in the life of our faith. Building community requires being with others. And I have to say that, there are many of us who sometimes prefer the little corners of our homes or our worlds and isolate ourselves. Well, we got to work on that, because we don't build community by isolating ourselves. And today, we got electronic means to get together, to communicate, and so on. But even with those electronic means, virtual ways of communicating, we still need to be together, the intentionality of building community. And as we build the church, through these faith communities, the domestic church, we build the parish, we build the diocese, and so on, then we are called as Christians to build society. We are called to build our neighborhoods, our towns, our cities, our country. That means that being a Christian demands that we have a public life, that we bring our faith into public life. We must vote. We need to pay taxes. We need to get engaged in the conversations that shape the life of our nation. And finally, the fourth practice, which is very simple, once again, help someone who is in need. Simple. Help someone who is in need. Why? Because every time we encounter our sister or our brother, we encounter the person of Jesus Christ. Whether the person is hungry, or the person is alone, whether the person is thirsty, or in prison, or an immigrant, we encounter the person of Jesus Christ in those people. So identify those who are poor and vulnerable in your community. No, there are many people who are lonely. There are many people who are sad. There are people who have addictions. There are people who have been abandoned. There are people who may have lost a job, may have lost a dear relative. So find someone in your community and ask this person, what can I do for you? And do something. That's it. That's what being a Christian is all about, you know? And in doing so, then commit to building communities of hospitality, communities of welcoming. One of them, one of them being the parish. Parishes should be welcoming communities. Everybody should be welcomed, especially sinners, no? We need to get away from that idea that only the perfect ones will, are welcome into our churches, because then they will be very empty, I gotta tell you. So we need to be welcoming communities, and as we build towards hospitable communities, we need to start looking at our biases. There are many biases that sometimes prevent us from building community and serving others. Some of them could be racial biases, could be linguistic biases. Some of them could be class biases or ideological biases. So being a Christian is about being attentive to those. What I have just given to you, these four practices: speak about your faith, celebrate your faith, build community, and help someone who is in need, actually is not something that I made up. This has been the curriculum of Christianity for 2,000 years. And there are actually beautiful words in Greek, if you want to brag about some Greek words with your friends, to name these words. For instance, about, the idea of giving witness, martyria. The idea of celebrating the faith, liturgia. The idea of building community, koinonia. The idea of serving one another, diaconia. So we got martyria, liturgia, koinonia, diaconia as the curriculum of practicing the faith and giving the good news. Let's go back to the beginning, and with this I will conclude. On the one hand, then, God has done something great in us. God has, is working in us through the Holy Spirit. We give witness of that, and we do it with joy. And because we have had an encounter with Christ, we go out and share that witness regularly, and we do it with joy. And we do it so others will have faith, so others will be in communion with God and with one another in the community of the baptized. My dear friends, God bless you, and may God give you the wisdom to speak about your faith, celebrate your faith, build community, and serve with the love of Christ.